So we're not just sitting here in silence. Hi, everybody. Welcome as you're popping in. We're going to get started in like about 30 more seconds, but welcome. And like my colleague Joanna says, say hi in the chat. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and start us off. So hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the first of our lightning talk sessions. My name is David Lemons, and I'll be moderating this session. The lightning talk sessions this year all have themes, and this year, and these 4 sessions that you're going to be seeing today are grouped under the emotional intelligence theme. I'm going to introduce each presenter and session title right before they start, but before we get into it, I'm going to go over a few logistical items, which are not going to be new to anybody who's been attending sessions all day today already. So this session is being recorded. Captions are available during the session by clicking on the live CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Thank you to Danielle Gioba for providing these. Presenters are each going to have 10 minutes to present their talk. Then we'll do a combined Q&A at the end. Please use the Q&A feature in Zoom for any presentation questions. You can choose to do this anonymously. I'll be facilitating the Q&A on behalf of our presenters, and you're welcome to ask questions of all presenters or just one. It will help me as I moderate the ending session if you'll add the name of the person you're talking to or their presentation into the question. That'll help me with moderating at the end. Please use the chat for general comments or technical issues. Joanna Kimmett will be monitoring the chat for any questions and comments. And Joanna will also be adding some links into the chat. One is for collaborative resource sharing. If you think of a related reading, podcast, video, or something else, please share it with us in Calm's recommended resources shared Zotero. And then the link after that shared resources will be our conference code of conduct. And with that, I believe I'm ready to start us off with our first lightning talk. I'm going to introduce Gillian, Keleher, and Rapp, who have the first presentation, which is called Engaging Staff in Cultivating a Holistic Work Environment.
Thanks, David. I'm going to share my slides. Is that good for everyone? Everyone can see that? Perfect. Okay, so I'm Gillian Keleher. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Reserves and Media Coordinator at UC Santa Cruz. Our other team member, Victoria Bruner, is unable to join us today, but we wanted to give them a shout out for their contributions to our talk.
And hi, I am Rapp. I use she, her pronouns as well, and I'm a Reserves and Media Lead at UC Santa Cruz. Our lightning talk is called Engaging Staff and Cultivating a Holistic Work Environment.
So what does that even mean? Well, our team takes pride in experimenting with how professional, personal, and academic lives can be interwoven to create a more authentic work experience and a more intentional work-life balance. So for us, engaging has to do with a commitment to be present, open, and curious with each other. It's also important to note that team consent and buy-in is absolutely necessary to this process. It only works if everyone in the group is on board. Cultivating refers to creativity, focusing time and energy, and collaboration, all in an effort to create a workplace where we actually want to spend our time. And our shared definition of a holistic work environment is a place where staff can safely present their authentic selves, where their identities and well-being matter as much as their output. I started engaging in this work, which we casually call team experimentation, after reading Brené Brown's book, Dare to Lead. There was a particular chapter that I really wanted to share with my team at the time, and so we all read and discussed it together. And that discussion was the most rewarding and exciting conversation we'd had at work in a long time. And that's how I became curious about how we could engage in more out-of-the-box team activities and how dedicating time towards those things would impact our operational work. I'm just gonna move the slide forward.
So our team has implemented a few different holistic practices that help foster a sense of closeness and camaraderie. These are a few examples of the experimental team building practices that we've enjoyed and thus continue to implement. The first is discussion meetings. So we dedicate 1 unit meeting per month in which we discuss a pre-selected work or works. We do not conduct any kind of operational work during these meetings, and instead use the time to discuss and explore a range of different mediums, from podcasts and articles to music and poetry. Sometimes we'll choose a topic or subject that we use as a guide when selecting what type of content we want to share, and other times we'll make selections based on what speaks to us. Our second practice is starting our team meetings with an icebreaker or a reflection question. We rotate through our team to determine who is selecting the icebreaker or reflection question each week. Icebreakers tend to be more casual and require less forethought, and are often lighthearted and fun. Reflection questions are deeper and more personal and are shared out to the team in advance of the meeting so that we all have time to consider our responses. We typically check in as a team the morning of our unit meeting to decide which type of question feels most appropriate. And another practice that we're experimenting with is semi-annual team retreats. These retreats are held off-site during library business hours and are an opportunity for us to connect with each other away from the workplace. For our retreat this past spring, we visited the Monterey Bay Aquarium and spent the afternoon leisurely exploring downtown Monterey, which was a lot of fun. We were able to have interesting and meaningful discussions without the potential for operational distractions. Our aspirational ideas for future retreats include visiting a museum or natural space, attending a workshop, or engaging in a creative practice together, like visiting a pottery studio.
So why do we think this work matters? We divided why we think it matters into a couple of thematic areas. So in terms of team building, it's a really valuable way to build a team identity and a foundation. It provides us opportunities to share more parts of ourselves at work than if we were solely focused on operational work. We've found that it builds joy into our work days. It also strengthens our team relationships and it promotes flexibility. And then I also wanted to give a nod to yesterday's session on boundaries and mention that this work provides the foundation for the types of boundary conversations that the presenter was talking about. In terms of professional development, it provides a path by encouraging creative thinking about our work, helps prevent feelings of stagnation as we continually ask questions and share ideas, and it offers an opportunity to explore other approaches to library work. And we also believe that this type of work strengthens our resolve and our ability to engage in equity, diversity, and inclusion work, which is of great importance to our team. It promotes inclusivity as we expand our definitions of what productivity and professionalism are, and it helps us start to dismantle the white supremacy-rooted cultural expectations of many professional environments. It encourages us to continually evaluate our workplace culture as we ask questions like, how can we change our organizational structures to allow us to bring more parts of ourselves to work? Do all of our staff feel comfortable in our workplace? What isn't working at our library? And finally, building an environment of closeness supports allyship. When we know each other deeply, we are called to share each other's burdens and to look for collective solutions.
So the impact of this work is far-reaching and quite varied. I would like to share my personal impact. Engaging in these practices has provided me with an opportunity to challenge myself and my teammates and consider alternative ways of thinking about things. I've learned that it's okay to make mistakes or disagree, as we as a team have created an environment in which we all feel safe and supported. This work has also helped me to feel comfortable being transparent with Gillian and Victoria about where I'm at emotionally. I don't feel like I have to pretend I'm okay all the time, which is an incredibly liberating experience. Additionally, we as a team strive to demonstrate that it's not only okay, but encouraged for us to ask for what we need whether that's taking a mental health day or setting aside time to get outside for a walk. Something our team member Victoria wanted me to share is that joining a team that asks if you want to engage in this type of work with them creates a pathway to learn about the new workplace and integrate into the new team. It really supports the idea that every time a new person joins a team, the team becomes an entirely unique iteration. It also creates opportunities for us to share subject matter that we feel passionately about, but typically wouldn't have the opportunity to discuss at work. We're encouraged to listen actively and reflect deeply. In a largely data-driven field, we consider the staff human experience as valuable and valid evidence of the health of the organization. We feel safe and we feel seen and are in turn more present, thoughtful, and compassionate employees. Finally, candid discussions foster closeness and kinship, which allows us to be better advocates for both ourselves and for our fellow colleagues.
How do we advise you to advocate to do this type of work at your own organizations? Well, first of all, creating a foundation of trust and safety for your team is going to be the single most important element of being able to successfully experiment and expand your ideas of professionalism. So start small. A work discussion group is a great place to start, can be within your unit first before possibly branching out to larger groups in your library. And keep in mind that the size of the group can affect the dynamic of that conversation. Do what you're able to at your level. If you're a manager, you have the power to decide how your direct reports can use their time. And if you can prioritize even a small amount of time for non-operational work, it really adds up in terms of impact. If you're not a manager, talk to your supervisor about this work. See if they'll support time spent on it. Share our slides with them to support your request. Ask your team for input and ideas and mean it. There is no better way to get buy-in. Welcome the unexpected that will come if you ask them for their ideas and you actually move forward with those ideas. And finally, find an advocate in your leadership team who sees the value of staff engagement, or even someone who is simply interested in innovative approaches to professional development.
We've included some resources that further explore the importance of this work. These are only a small cross-section of the many readings that are available on the subject of creating a holistic workplace. There is also a link to UC Santa Cruz's land acknowledgement. More importantly, if you would like to support the Amamutsin, which is Santa Cruz's local tribal band, please consider donating via the QR code. Our contact information is included on our title slide, so please don't hesitate to email us with any and all questions you might have. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much, Gillian and Becca. Hope you're seeing the reactions, the applause, and the hearts. So our next session, session number 2, is from Caitlin Bagley with The Stress of Managerial Secrets. I know, but I can't tell you yet. Take it away, Caitlin.
Well, good afternoon. Let me get my screen shared here. All right. So let me get introduced. This is The Stress of Managerial Secrets. I want to tell you, but I can't yet. So some background about me and this role. In June of 2020, I became chair of my faculty department of, at the time, 8 faculty. Notoriously great time to start work as a chair. Although I had had some very minor student worker supervision in my history, this was my first time actually supervising this many people, right? 8 people was a lot by my counting. The department was also very newly reorganized. People were working together who had not always worked together. I had to figure out how we all collaborated together when some people just wanted to keep doing what they had been doing. And then during this time, there were 2 retirements. 1 person quit, 2 new hires, and a lot of role redistribution. So there were some obvious challenges. Obviously, COVID didn't help anything. Everyone was remote. I was returning from a sabbatical, and I did not expect it, but I had missed out on a lot of personal conflicts, a lot of changes within the library, things that I hadn't seen during my sabbatical. Managing remote is tricky. It's possible, but it was tricky. And then managing in person is still tricky, right? I came in from the shadow of somebody who was a micromanager, and I knew that was what I didn't want to do. But I quickly found out that those were some of the only skill sets that I knew. And I was trying to figure out how not to use the only skill set I knew. Some common issues that I came across, probably familiar to you, but not all of them. Family life issues, illness, personal illness, and illness of family, personality disputes, work from home distribution. Wasn't expecting that one, but now I am. Search committees, differing perceptions of transparency, balancing individual workloads, goal setting, performance reviews, DEI, not feeling heard, the list goes on. So I spent a lot of my time reflecting on just what I was supposed to be talking with administration about. On the one hand, I was pretty certain that being a chair meant I was supposed to be talking about issues happening in the department and how to solve them with my administration. And on the other hand, my faculty were getting mad at me anytime they found out I had talked about them. But I was really confused what I was supposed to be talking about them, right? Similarly, administration seemed to assume I had far more power over the faculty than I felt I had. Certainly, I could make suggestions for how they did certain actions and roles, but ultimately, I lacked many motivation tools, right? I can't change their salary. I can't change their hours. All I can do is make suggestions. So being chair is like being stuck between two worlds, right? I hold faculty status, and yet I'm temporarily in administration. And yes, as a faculty member, I was representing the voices of my faculty. I quickly learned that often they wanted to know exactly how I was going to interact with upper administration. And this brought up questions from them, valid, of what did you talk about with the dean? And why didn't you tell them about our conversation? Or excuse me, why didn't you talk about our conversation with them? Well, yeah, sort of. What I also found out was that big picture issues take a long time to get into the trenches. Academia moves fast, or slow. God, no, it doesn't move fast. But gossip is fast. Oftentimes those discussions with leadership, we were plotting things that wouldn't take place for 1 or 2 semesters later, frequently years later, right? So the timing of when people heard and learned about those things mattered. So I heard faculty complaining about issues that I knew there was a fix in the pipeline, and I desperately wanted to say, hey, don't worry, something's going to happen. But I had to keep my mouth shut for strategic reasons, which can sometimes be a hard thing, right? So after the fact, I would hear things like, well, why did you let us work for so long on that project when you knew this was coming around the corner? Well, I kind of tried to discourage you, but you were passionate about it, and I want you to be passionate, right? On the flip side of this, there's the presumption of knowledge, right? Everyone assumes because you're in a slightly higher level, you're getting a lot more knowledge than you actually do. So I was in a lot of meetings with, let's see, my ADs, my associate deans, my dean. I wasn't very often in the room with the provost or the board of trustees. I'm a classic middle manager, right? People assumed I knew details about decisions made by the provost, the board of trustees, etc. But I'm a chair. And people were often disappointed or assumed I wasn't telling them details on purpose, right? Things where you have to know what's going on at the upper administrative level. But I tell you, my greatest conversation to date with the provost was on the quality of a salad. It was a delicious salad. That's all I've said to him so far. So this brought in the other side, what I call HR voice. A faculty member would come up to me and say, hey, something seems wrong with our colleague. What's going on? And I know what's going on. but I feel that HR voice means I have to say, thank you for sharing that with me. But sort of, okay, my personal thought is, I know I'm worried too about so-and-so, but I don't feel that I can say that, right? But what I found out was everyone wants a verbalization of the vibe, right? Most people can sense when something's going on or something's up. And it's really, really natural to want to know the details of what's going on. And managerial secrets often catch you in that HR limbo of not being able to acknowledge and verbalize that vibe. Or at least they caught me in that limbo. HR language feels weird to use with your friends, right? It's a bit like suddenly morphing into a different person. You started off having a normal conversation, but they tiptoed into what I call a gray rock area. And suddenly you're using phrases like, well, the search is progressing. And I would advise you to speak to so-and-so in the Title IX office if that's a concern. And that's not natural language for me. Maybe it's natural for you, but my instincts are always to say versions of, oh, dude, that's so effed up. Or, oh my gosh, you should see the candidates we have in this search. They're amazing. I want this one, right? I want to spill everything. But the other part was I learned administration uses language defensively. I didn't say they were fired. Their contract wasn't renewed. Yeah, but no, legally there's a difference. The language is designed to protect the corporation, and it can feel really dehumanizing, both from the person who's saying it and to the people who are hearing it. And people just want to know what happened. It is super normal to care for your colleagues. So lacking training, I went silent. I didn't know what to say. I just tried to avoid the conversation. And oof, that feels terrible to say, right? No wonder people were upset. I didn't want to use weird administrative language that didn't feel like me. And I felt like if I didn't use that language, HR was going to find out and I would get in trouble. So I got caught in this limbo. However, I had to find a way to thread the needle. You can't really avoid critical conversations for long. So these were the tactics that I found helped. 1, who needs to know? Be really honest about what's coming from you as their chair and what's coming from another source, be that from HR, be that from your dean. Be clear about where the language is coming from. And then separate who's just curious. Because even those people, you can tell them something. It might not be a satisfactory something, but you can tell them and acknowledge their curiosity. And finally, acknowledge that the language is weird if it's not natural for you, right? What I found helped me best was to wear different hats for different roles and verbalize when I was shifting gears. So sometimes a conversation is friendly, it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with being a chair, and people switch gears. Hey, can I put my chair hat on for a second? I need to advise you to do this. Or, hey, I know we were just joking, but that's an issue, and I think as your chair, we should probably do this. All this considering, it's a tricky hat to figure out when to put which hat on. So thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, send them on my way.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. All right, I'm going to send it over to our third lightning talk presenter. So our third session is being done by Christina, Sheley, who will be presenting Building Psychological Safety into the Onboarding Process. Take it away, Christina.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Let me get myself set up here real quick. I hope everybody can see that. So as said, my name is Christina Sheley, and I am the Director of Business Engineering and Entrepreneurship at the Cornell University Library. So just to give you a little context of where I sit in the organization, I have a staff of 8 that report to me, and I report up through our Associate University Librarian for research services. So just like Caitlin, I sit in the middle of the organization, and I just felt everything that she said. So I oversee 3 different unit libraries libraries here at Cornell, as in addition to library services for entrepreneurship and for our Cornell Tech campus in New York City. So I was going to focus today on building psychological safety into the onboarding experience, but at first I just wanted to point out that I have put a link to the Calm land acknowledgement on my first slide here, and I just want to honor its call that we take time to pause and reflect and examine our shift in approach to this practice. I also wanted to acknowledge that I am presenting from Cornell University, and it is located on the traditional homelands of the Gayu Kono, the Cayuga Nation. So my story begins in late 2021 and early 2022 when we hired 3 new individuals into the business engineering and entrepreneurship department. So there were 2 new librarians and 1 half-time staff member. And these were the first people that I hired in since I had been in my position since 2019. And so I started thinking a lot about the onboarding experience. Our human resources office had some onboarding materials, and we also had some legacy processes as well. But it was really an opportunity to re-examine things. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how to make this a much more user-centered practice, what information was needed, what context was needed, obviously what training was needed, what structure and approach were going to be the best. Previously, we had many long days with lots and lots of packed information and back-to-back sessions, just really relaying content. And then lastly, I wanted to think about how to build community within the team and across the library during the onboarding process. One of the other things that I was thinking about this time was safety, because we were still in the throes of the pandemic at that point. And so there was obviously a lot of anxiety and collective trauma. We had people starting remotely and were not coming in person right away. So there was often isolation. So while I couldn't do much about some of the bigger safety aspects, that kind of piece of things was really at the forefront. And I also recognize that in general, when somebody comes into a new organization, that can be an extremely vulnerable time. I don't know about many of you, but whenever I've started a new job, no matter how great it goes, the first few days or weeks, I'm still always pretty overwhelmed and feeling, out of place. So, and even if you've done a similar job at another organization, there are new practices and processes to learn, new spaces to navigate, new coworkers and expectations to get to know. Along with these initial thoughts about safety, I had also attended some internal training hosted by our organizational development and effectiveness group, where I learned about something called the stepladder of group dynamics. And I have the stepladder here on the slide that I'm projecting. And the first step is also safety. So whenever anybody new comes into an organization or a new group, they have to define how they define who they are within that particular dynamic. And so they have to determine how they are going to be treated, where they be listened to, what sort of influence might they have. And that is the first step before building trust or group identity, or even things like goals and vision. So safety is something that started to cement itself as important in general as people enter the organization or onto a new team. And I also started looking at research around psychological safety, because it indicated that safe organizational environments increase innovation, inclusiveness, and well-being at the individual level and lead to potentially higher performance overall. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes here talking a little bit about psychological safety and defining what that is. So this is a concept that was first recognized by Amy Edmondson, a professor of leadership and management at Harvard Business School. Edmondson landed on it when she was doing doctoral research, when she set out to study the relationship between error making and teamwork in hospitals. So her expectations that were effective teams would probably make fewer mistakes, but what she found is that teams who reported better teamwork seemed to experience more errors. And when she really dug into the data, she learned that better teams were just more willing to report their mistakes. They felt safe doing so. So Edmondson went on to write a book called The Fearless Organization, Creating Psychological Safety in the Workplace for Learning, Innovation, and Growth. And this is her definition of psychological safety in that work. It is a climate in which people are comfortable expressing and being themselves. More specifically, when people have psychological safety at work, they feel comfortable sharing concerns and mistakes without fear of embarrassment or retribution. She goes on to say that in the psychologically safe workplace, people are not hindered by interpersonal fear. They feel willing and able to take the inherent interpersonal risks of candor. So they have more fear about holding back than they do about contributing. So it seemed to me that during the onboarding process, it was particularly important to focus on how to make people comfortable, not only in being themselves at work and with their new coworkers, but in their environments generally, so that you started creating this psychologically safe environment almost from the beginning. I read more about psychological safety when I moved on to a book by Timothy Clark. He's the founder and CEO of Leader Factor, a global leadership consulting and training organization. And he believes that there are 4 stages to building psychological safety in an organization or team. And people must work through these individual stages before they can feel safe enough to start to speak up and challenge the system. So the first stage is inclusion safety. You must feel safe and accepted for who you are. You must connect and belong, because that's part of being, that's a basic human need. The next would be learner safety. At this stage, you feel safe asking questions, learning new things, experimenting, and making mistakes. Giving and receiving feedback is crucial at this stage, and it's a crucial part of learning. Contributor safety. You feel comfortable and safe enough to make contributions using your skills and knowledge to make a difference. And then last is the challenger safety. At this stage, you feel comfortable challenging certain notions when you see an opportunity to improve or change something. So the first 2 stages seem particularly important during onboarding. Again, making individuals feel like they are included and belong from their first moments, but also making learning safe by allowing time for questions, processing, and giving lots of feedback. So armed with this research, I started coming up with a few approaches and tips that I've outlined here on this slide, and I'll just go through these quickly. So one was get to know people as much as they feel comfortable with. So this actually started with me. So I decided to schedule 30 minutes at the end of each day for the first 2 weeks of the new people's onboarding, just so that I could get to know them and that they could get to know me. So some of it was about making them feel comfortable. Some of it was about answering any questions that they might have. And then some of it was about minimizing any power structures that individuals might feel, me being their supervisor or the person that they reported to. I wanted them to feel safe in asking questions and speaking up. And another part of this was the second bullet point, which is examining your approach for setting expectations and directions. So for me, this was getting to know people and what their kind of hopes were, what they were, where their gaps might be, what they wanted to get out of the position. Obviously, we have certain things that need to get completed, but it was really being able to co-create and set direction together if possible. And so those first couple of weeks were building that type of relationship as well. The next thing we did was connect with other team members for learning. So all team members, whether new or had been on the team for a while, were part of the training for new hires. So seasoned team members would provide background information or context or train on specific topics. So for example, someone might provide an overview of how to make edits on the website, for example. This allowed teammates to get to know each other while also learning the skills needed for the job. We also implemented staff shadowing. So once the new people felt comfortable with beginning work on their own, seasoned team members would shadow their work and provide feedback and ask and answer any questions. It felt like peer-to-peer feedback in this sense might be more comfortable as the learning process continued. The next thing that we tried was facilitating community building across the organization. So it can be hard to get to know people when you're new, and simply introducing yourself to someone can feel like a lot of social risk. So I would try to facilitate questions across the library system through different tours and coffees and small chats. I did ask the new people if they were okay and comfortable with me doing this. Sometimes that isn't a comfortable thing, and I did actually only have one person decline, and so I honored that. But for anybody who was interested, I would look for other individuals in the organization that they might be working with on a regular basis, or somebody who might have a similar role that they could ask questions of, and just generally allow people to get to know each other in a different type of environment. The next thing we did was create a space and environment to ask questions and to question. So I think some of this is about setting up a larger environment around psychological safety, but one of the small ways that we tried to do this is actually think about the structure of the onboarding process. As I mentioned previously, it was a lot of long days, back-to-back content, not a whole lot of processing time. So not a lot of time for people to think about the information that they're getting, the questions that they might have, and to really get a sense of, where they fit into the process, but also, was the way that we were doing things making sense? And if it wasn't, was their ability to kind of question that and think about it at that stage? Something that we're still currently working on is thinking about how and when to give feedback. So some of this is asking people how they like to get feedback and letting that be a little bit more self-directed instead of us deciding when to give feedback or how we might assess or do those sorts of activities. But some of it is also thinking about, when might be the best time to give feedback and when might be some time to hang back in order to build comfort and confidence.
Christina, I'm so sorry, but we are out of time. We're over the 10 minutes. I'm so sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
So we're gonna have to move on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. All right, we are about ready to start with our fourth and final presentation, and then we'll jump into Q&A. So again, thanks, Christina, for that presentation. And I'm gonna introduce Dani Brecher Cook, who's presenting How to Apologize, an Underrated Management Skill. Take it away, Dani.
Okay, thanks, David. And I know you're going to keep me on time, so I appreciate that. So hi, everyone. My name is Dani Brecher Cook. I'm an Associate University Librarian at UC San Diego Library, and I am here to talk with you about how to apologize, which is a skill that I did not have when I became a manager in 2016. Before I begin, I also want to acknowledge that I am a cisgender white woman, and so I have a certain amount of privilege that comes along with that and a certain amount of safety in being able to apologize. So I want to say that this may not be true for all of you, and if you feel that it is not safe for you to apologize in your environment, you should listen to your gut, and you know your environment better than any of the rest of us. I still hope that this framework may be useful for you. So what we're going to talk about in the next 9 minutes, we're going to talk about what is an apology and why it matters. We're going to talk about how we learn to apologize or how we haven't learned how to apologize. And then finally, a step-by-step guide on a good apology. So again, this is a personal journey for me. I'm still learning as well. And I hope that this will be useful to you. So first, what is an apology? We're going to start with the dictionary definition because it's always a fun place to start. So looking at the best dictionary of all, that's spicy on Twitter, Merriam-Webster. So an apology is an admission of error or discourtesy accompanied by an expression of regret. I think this is the way that most of us are trained to think about an apology, of saying, hey, I messed up, I'm sorry. I'd like to suggest that that is incomplete for a good apology, that we're missing two key factors. So those factors are commitment to a meaningful action. So what is something that you're going to try to do to make the thing that happened right? And how are you going to prevent that from happening again? Like they say, fool me once, shame on me, or shame on you, whatever. You know that phrase. I'm totally going to mess it up. So if you do the action once, okay, people can forgive you. But if you keep on doing it, that you've clearly not learned your lesson. So why is this especially important for managers? So I'm grateful to Christina for talking a lot about psychological safety. So as a quick reminder, that's the shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So as a manager, you can help create that sense of psychological safety by owning your mistakes. And an apology is one way to do that. You're modeling your own vulnerability. You're showing that you can make a mistake and recover and show what it looks like to learn. That can help build trust. People know that you will take ownership and accountability for the mistakes that you make, and all of us do. I continue to do so myself. And finally, that you demonstrate accountability for those actions. So these are all important factors for psychological safety on teams. And hopefully, apologies and that commitment to making things right is something that your team can work on together. I want to share this quote from the Rabbi Danya Rutenberg, who wrote a book on apology recently called On Repentance and Repair. And she shares that if harm is perpetuated by a person that possesses more power than the individual or community is harmed, denying that ill intent can serve the interests of the more powerful party, allowing it to evade accountability and maintain the status quo. Which is to say that especially for those of us who have positional power, it's especially important to recognize when we've done something to harm someone and to try to make that right. So of course, we hope that goes in both directions, but for people who are managers, I think especially important. Okay, so how do we learn to apologize? I'm going to say I didn't really learn how to apologize well as a child, and I bet you didn't either. If you did, congratulations to your parents. They did an amazing job, or your teachers. So what we learn often never goes past the I'm sorry part. So for example, I know like when I would do something wrong as a child, I would say I'm sorry. And if I was really sorry, I didn't mean to do it, I would say I'm sorry more times. And there is certainly a place for saying I'm sorry in our culture, and that usually is synonymous with like, that sucks, I'm sympathizing with you. I'm sorry to hear that happen to you. I'm sorry for that experience. So the way that we're often taught to apologize is as a strategy to highlight social rules and promote social success. So it's less about making amends, less about doing the right thing, and more about fitting in with society and kind of performing those right actions and showing kind of the minimum that you know that you transgressed in some way. I would say also as managers and as workers, we're sometimes told that we shouldn't apologize, that it shows a lack of power, that we lose something when we apologize. And I think there's more to gain in many cases. So it's kind of turning this concept of don't apologize at work, it makes you look weak, on its head. And again, that may not be true in every situation, but a blanket don't apologize at work statement is not going to help your team feel more comfortable with each other. Yeah, to the person in the chat, it's not always sorry for the action, sorry for getting caught, the worst kind of apology. So how to apologize? First, I want to talk about when you should probably apologize. So if you made a mistake that impacted someone else, if it didn't impact someone else and no one else knows about it, I guess you could apologize to yourself, but really we're talking about relationships in terms of apologies. If you hurt someone else, even if it wasn't intentional. So I think we've all probably received those pseudo apologies that are like, I'm sorry that you feel that way, and taking no responsibility for the action. So that's the worst. You want to actually own the action. And if your relationship can't move forward until you actually have that apology and have that conversation, that's a good moment to know that you probably should engage in that behavior. When should you not apologize? Equally important. If you went to the presentation yesterday about boundaries, if you set a reasonable boundary, you don't need to apologize if you need to take a sick day, for example. If you're asking for clarification or need help, that's not a moment where you have to say that you're sorry. It's okay to need help. If you aren't actually sorry, if you actually have no remorse for the thing you did, you probably shouldn't apologize for it until you've done some more internal work. Or if it's not safe for you, then you should, of course, prioritize your safety as well. So the first piece of a good apology is the acknowledgement of what happened. So I understand that when I did this thing, you felt this way. So I sent this email and it made you feel small, for example. And you want to center the way that the person who was harmed felt. Thanks, David. So it's not about what you meant to do, but about how it impacted them. And if you're not really sure what went wrong, you should probably wait to give your full apology until you can be both specific and actually genuine in that apology. So identifying what it is that occurred. Secondly, accepting responsibility. Even if it was not your intent, you did it. So here's a little formula for how you may consider talking about that. So you have to demonstrate to that person that you understand the thing that you did and how it led to that outcome. That's the way that you can open that door to doing something different next time. So it's not their responsibility, whatever you did, they didn't do it to themselves. So making sure that they understand that you know how you were involved. And then finally, making amends. Here's the way that I would like to try to make this up to you. And here is how I'm going to try to not do it again. You can ask for feedback from the person that you're apologizing to, but that person doesn't owe you any feedback. They don't have to do the work of telling you what to do differently. That's the work that we need to engage in ourselves. Here are the things I'm going to try to do differently. And of course, it can be really hard for them to tell you about the way they feel again. And that's something that we have to be prepared for in making an apology. So this opens the door to being able to move forward. And then, of course, you can't let it happen again, from my favorite Monsters, Inc. character, Roz. Lastly, I want to leave you with this idea of you may or may not be able to repair the harm that occurred. The work that you have to do is to try. And every individual will get to choose whether or not to forgive and move on. But all you can do is take that responsibility and try to do better. And I think that's important work for us to do as managers. So thank you so much for your time. And I have some resources for you on the last slide. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Dani. And thanks to all of our presenters. Can we do a virtual round of applause for everybody as we pivot to our Q&A portion? So again, as promised, I'm going to be moderating the Q&A. If you've got a question for our presenters, please pop it into the Q&A feature. And we will try to get to as many questions as we can. We're done here at 45 minutes after the hour, so we've got about 15 minutes. But if I keep talking, that's not going to be very much time. So we're going to jump into our first question, which is for our first presenters of the day. So it's from Amy Wainwright, who asks, how do you deal with people who prefer not to do this type of work? Maybe they think it's too personal or emotional or a waste of time.
Yeah, Amy, that's a really great question. I have had that happen. And for the brief period of time where that person was on our team, we didn't do that work. We told the staff person about what we had done in the past and that we really enjoyed it and how it sort of impacted us and also how it improved our operational work. But the person still wasn't interested or open to it. And so we simply weren't doing it as a team. And we were engaging in other ways, like through our EDI group in the library, but we weren't doing the specific teamwork. It really does have to have everyone's agreement that it's important.
Thank you. I'm going to kick it over to Christina, I think, who has a question from an anonymous attendee. So for the coffee chats, were you at those meetings or were you sending a, hey, will you meet with this new employee for coffee to chat about your new role?
Yes, no, I didn't attend those because I really wanted them to be just between the 2 or 3 individuals. So I would, yes, identify somebody in the existing in the library who I thought would be, on par as far as maybe role or interests or something of that nature. And I would reach out and just say, listen, we've got a new person starting. I'd love for you to meet with them. And this is informal and, that can take whatever focus that you feel comfortable with. And I never had anybody ever say no. They always were really excited to meet somebody new. And then I would I have a big onboarding schedule if anybody ever wants to see it, but I would put it on the schedule and then I would let them kind of reach out and figure out all the details. So yeah, a little bit of matchmaking is kind of how I think about it.
Love that. Coffee matchmaking with new employees. So we've got a question for Dani next. So Dani, how do you think about apologizing for things that your higher ups did that you didn't have complete control over?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I feel like you can't apologize for things that aren't in your sphere of control. I think you can, this is like that moment for the, I'm sorry, that sucks, kind of, I'm sorry. I think you can empathize with that person. I think you can maybe brainstorm ways to work together to figure out if there's a way around whatever that decision is that will work for them. But it's not your responsibility. And it's not something necessarily that you can change. So it wouldn't really be a meaningful apology, I don't think. I think there's probably a different way that you would want to work with that person.
Awesome. I got a question for Caitlin now, which probably makes sense given that Caitlin has not spoken yet during the Q&A, and I promised I would try to go around the circle. So for Caitlin, how do you practice the switching hats you were talking about during your presentation?
Yeah, that takes time, doesn't it? I think in the beginning, one of the things that I did most was circling back in terms of I'd left the room and then I would think about it, be in my office, be like, wait a second. And then I would just go back down the hallway and say, hey, can I talk to you as your chair? That was my early days of switching hats. Now I'm a lot quicker at the draw of putting on whatever hat it is. But literally, I think it's a lot of reflection of what's going on.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. I've got a question for Gillian. How do you not talk about operational stuff during that one meeting a month if time-sensitive things have arisen? That is, how do you manage to keep to the reading as assigned rather than defer to the work needs of the moment?
I mean, it's a decision and an agreement, and it is hard sometimes, but we simply will address those operational time-sensitive things in other ways, through a group chat, through email if necessary, even just like checking in person quickly outside of that meeting. But we really are committed to preserving that meeting for what we intend to do with it. And by giving it that level of respect and that level of importance, we find that our team, everyone takes it that seriously. And it's great when like during finals, when it's a really busy week for us, we'll even commit to it during that type of week. And it feels so nourishing, and it feels like a respite from the fact that the rest of the time during that day, we're going to be going nonstop.
Makes total sense. Next one on the list is for Dani. So if you have a conflict with a coworker and end up not talking to one another, but know you didn't do anything egregious or wrong, but they still took offense, should this person apologize anyway so you can continue the working relationship? Have any advice? And I should also mention, I'm directing these questions at an individual, but if other people have thoughts about the question, please feel free to jump in with an answer. Anyway,
Yeah,
go ahead, Dani.
If other people have thoughts, I would definitely love to hear them. Y'all have such great presentations too, especially on this question. It's such a tough one. I think you have to talk to each other if you're at work. And it sounds like this person feels like you did do something wrong. And if you know what that thing is, and you feel like you can take responsibility for it and commit to doing something different next time, I personally would probably attempt to apologize to that person. So I can think of an example for myself where I made a choice that I really thought was like the best thing. And the feedback that I received from the person who was on the other end of that was like, this was really terrible and you really hurt my feelings. And again, like I thought I did the right thing. But I needed to own that it made them feel small and lesser. And it was not the way that they would have preferred that I have done that. And so that's the thing that I can apologize for and say, I understand now that this is the way that feels to you. And so next time I'm going to do it this way instead. And that allows us to move on rather than kind of having this thing fester. I think the thing that can be really, really harmful to our organizations is letting things fester, right? Like we just don't talk about it. And I think that was like the reason I realized that I needed to learn how to do this work was there was a lot festering and we needed to talk about it. And because I had the positional power, I needed to be the one to open that door. So I don't know if that's a great answer. And again, would love to hear from fellow panelists if you have thoughts. But yeah, that's a hard situation. I'm sorry to hear that. There we go. There's that. I'm sorry to hear that you're having to deal with that.
Doing that thing where I count backwards, see if anybody has any other thoughts. And I will ask Christina this next question. Somebody asked, we will be onboarding a new university librarian or director in the next month. Do you have any suggestions for how to support them with the lens that you talked about during your talk?
Yeah, that's a really great question and a hard one. So again, if anybody wants to help me out, please let me know. So, I think some of it is just really trying to come at this from a very user-centered perspective, right? So it is what, what can you build into that onboarding process, even with the university librarian, that's going to help facilitate comfort and safety and connection. So, obviously there'll be a lot of different meetings with a lot of different groups, but I mean, it could be, making sure that they're coming to different facets of the organization to meet individuals and hear about the different operations and different units to make sure that there's information and comfort sharing there. But I don't know. Does anybody else have any thoughts or questions or thoughts about this one? As far as I've been thinking about it more from, folks who are coming into, kind of the lower parts of organizations, but yeah, it's an interesting space to think about somebody in higher administration.
All right, thank you, Christina, for that answer. I'm going to Caitlin next. Somebody asked about, I believe you talked about scheduling concerns in your presentation. The person is asking, do you have any say in scheduling? So for instance, do you have the ability to give faculty permission to come in later or leave earlier? That sort of thing. Do you have any ability to give them that flexibility?
Very minor. So I've certainly had under the table sorts of, you need to go home, I think you're just having a tough day, that kind of stuff. But then one of the things we worked on was a faculty policy leave, and we were in the middle of doing that with our dean. So that was another balancing role of what leave we can do. So I had some control over scheduling, but I think partially just due to the way we had been reorganized, there wasn't much precedent for how it was used, and I was not willing to take full advantage of that.
That makes sense. I think we have time for one or two more questions. So I'm going to go to the one that's the most upvoted, which is for Gillian. So the question observes, it looks like yours is a pretty small team. Do you have any insight on how this might scale if your team expands or if you manage a larger group?
Yeah, I would love to do this with a larger team. It's true. There's 3 of us that are in the direct unit that is doing this work together. We have brought some of it out to our larger department, which is about a group of 20, such as values conversations that we've had in those department meetings, sharing different ways of starting meetings, icebreakers, that type of thing. And it is very scalable. Again, it's all about making the time. I think the exciting part that would come with a larger group is more diversity of experience, more diversity of thought, more new ideas to share. And I think it would just be a matter of really having those conversations around, that we can't try every idea all the time, but that we will commit to each other to try each other's ideas as we are able to within the confines of our jobs.
That's great. I think we will have time for one more question, and I'll ask it to Dani because there are 2 at the top, both from anonymous attendees that seem to be asking about the same thing. So do you have a good response or any advice for when you receive an apology from someone higher up that doesn't acknowledge the harm? Another person phrases it, do you have any thoughts on being the receiving end of a not so great or non-apology? I get a lot of, I'm sorry you feel that way, which is difficult to respond to.
Yeah, I was so nervous that you were going to ask this question because it's so hard. I think I would start probably by thanking the person for their incomplete or insincere apology. Because at least they sort of did something, and that could be the starting point. And then I think I would follow up by saying, so thank you for that apology. This is the thing that happened, and I'd love to work with you on thinking about how that thing could not happen again, which again, sucks because you're taking on the responsibility for something that you didn't do. But if really the thing that matters is that it doesn't happen again, or it doesn't happen to someone else potentially, then trying to frame it as problem solving, I think is one way to open that conversation. But yeah, that's a great example of like a moment where it's not probably really safe for you to be like, that apology was terrible. Like do better, like as much as we might like to say that. So yeah, that's a really tough question and I really appreciate it.
So as we're closing out, I want to thank our presenters for answering the questions and for their great presentations. Hope everybody will join me in thanking them. Before we close out, you'll see in the chat, and I'll say here, there's an evaluation survey that's available for you to complete. The presenters would very much appreciate your feedback. You'll find a link to that evaluation in SCED. It's labeled feedback survey. Thank you all very much for attending. The next session starts tomorrow at 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific. Have a great rest of your day. And see you tomorrow.